good evening, everyone. I'll call to order this planning meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all members of the committee and all members of the public who are watching us this evening. We're glad that you're with us. The second item on the agenda is additions, deletions, amendments. We don't have any of those. Third item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. Does anyone have a pecuniary interest they'd like to declare this evening? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no minutes on the agenda to adopt. We have no public meetings. And so we'll move into committee of the whole and no delegations. And so that moves us on to reports, item 6.2. We have three items there. And the first one is item 6.2.1, L 2021-002 and Z 2021-020 for the Westdale Development Corporation at 1110 Godrich Street, and we'll turn it over to the planner, Barbara Mugabe, for the report. Barbara.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. I just need a few seconds for the presentation to load.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this opportunity to present a recommendation report for the commercial development proposed by Westdale. Committee may recall the public meeting was held last month on July 19th. At the time, comments had been received from members of the no comments had been received from members of the public. Committee required some modifications to the proposal to ensure adequate on-site parking and sufficient landscaping is provided. Committee also wanted to see 2 and not 3 vehicular access points off Devonshire Road. And as well, they wanted the applicant to preserve or repurpose the existing dwelling and barn. I'll briefly highlight the changes made in consideration of committee's comments. After the public meeting, we received one set of comments from a member of the public, Ms. Katie Lutz, which I will also speak to. The subject land is situated at the southwest intersection of Godrich Street and Devonshire Road in Port Elgin. The site is 6.74 acres in size. It is occupied by a farmhouse and a barn and is cultivated for corn. There are 2 designations and 2 zones on the site. There's the highway commercial along the Godrich Street frontage and residential in the west half. The purpose of the official plan amendment application is to change the residential designated portion of the lands to highway commercial designation. The zoning amendment application is seeking to change the residential first density R1 zone and highway commercial zone to highway commercial special holding HC-30-H. The zoning amendment application is also seeking to permit a seasonal outdoor sales area in conjunction with a permitted use on the site. Relief is required to reduce the landscaped open space from 30% of the lot area to 28%. If approved, the amendments will facilitate development in the form of a commercial plaza consisting of 4 single-story buildings. Building A is situated at the rear of the property or the west half of the property. It is the largest of the buildings. It is intended for possibly a supermarket. Building B is also located at the rear of the property next to Building A. The applicant has not indicated the potential use of the building. Building C is situated along the Godrich Street frontage. The intended use is a restaurant with a drive-through window. Building D is also situated along the Godrich Street frontage. The specific nature of the intended use has not yet been determined. A seasonal outdoor sales area use is also proposed and will be accessory to a permitted commercial use on the site. I will now provide a high-level overview of the policy framework. The Bruce County official plan states that higher order commercial facilities such as shopping centers servicing residents and visitors will locate in the primary urban communities designation. The proposal is for a shopping center and conforms to the county official plan. The local official plan encourages high commercial developments that do not adversely affect the commercial activities and contained in the core commercial designation. The predominant use of land shall be for those commercial uses which, because of space and parking demand, are not compatible with the compact nature of the core areas. The proposed development is strongly aligned with this policy. Highway commercial areas are dependent upon a high degree of access and visibility to vehicular traffic on main roads. The location of the subject land at the intersection of Godrich Street and Collector Road offers visibility and vehicle access that is required for large format retail uses along major transportation corridors. The plan requires buildings to have a gross floor area greater than 300 square meters, and at least one unit shall be 464 square meters. The proposed development meets this minimum requirement. On the screen is the landscape plan. I should also note that it is a policy of the local official plan for landscaping to be provided between highway commercial use or a parking area and the adjacent road. The applicant is proposing to landscape both the Godrich Street and Devonshire Road frontages. The zoning bylaw requires landscaped open space to be 30% of the lot area. The original proposal requested relief to reduce the landscaped open space area to 20.6%. Town staff and also committee wanted that percentage increase to get closer to the 30%. In consideration of this request, the applicant has increased the landscaping to 28% of the lot area. And I think that is sufficient landscaping to buffer parking areas from sidewalks, in addition to creating a softer and attractive perimeter. It is my opinion that the relief now requested is reasonable and minor in nature and should be considered. There is an existing 4-story residential use which is adjacent to the west edge of the subject land. Committee requested buffering from the proposed commercial development. To address this request, the landscape plan shows a vegetation screen at the rear of buildings A and B. The applicant is proposing a mix of trees. There's red pine and red maple, there's basswood and red oak. The details of the proposed landscaping are being dealt with by the town through the site plan approval process and should not be holding up this application for rezoning. I'll now speak to some of the matters, additional matters arising from the public meeting. Committee had wanted for the seasonal outdoor sales area to be included in the parking calculations. That has now been done. The outdoor sales area has been factored into the parking calculation. Buildings A through D plus the outdoor sales area will provide 273 parking spaces, whereas the minimum requirement is for 268 spaces. So this exceeds the minimum requirement by 5 spaces. Additionally, a minimum of 3 queuing spaces are required specifically associated with Building C. This is the restaurant use, and it will be providing 11 queuing spaces. So the grand total of 284 parking spaces will be provided. Committee also wanted for the applicant to consider a total of 2 accesses off Devonshire Road instead of the 3 that they were originally proposing. Town staff have advised during the discussion that I had with them that matters relating to accesses should be regulated through site plan approval process and not through the subject rezoning process. Committee had also wanted for the applicant to preserve or repurpose the existing farmhouse and barn because of its local significance and value. The applicant has reached out to the First Nations and the Ontario Barn Preservation, but they're still waiting for a response. Committee also requested amenity space, including a sit-down area with benches. The landscape plan includes amenity areas at the rear of buildings A and B, and also in the vicinity of buildings C and D along the Godrich Street frontage. The applicant has just clarified that the sit-down areas are not just for employees, but are also intended for customers as well. Now I'll speak to the public comments. We received comments from Ms. Katie Lutz. She has expressed concerns about reduced landscaping, preserving the farmhouse and barn for its significance. And as well, she thinks that the number of vehicular access points are excessive. I've already touched on these items, so I will not repeat myself. Ms. Lutz also asked, how will access points to the property change traffic flows in town? Will Waterloo Street traffic increase? Is there any capacity for this? The applicant advises that the development is supported by a transportation study. There is no data relating specifically to Waterloo Street. According to the transportation report, analysis of the future background and total traffic conditions confirmed that the Godrey Street and Devonshire Road intersection will continue to operate acceptably. Ms. Lutz also questions the need for grocery store given the shortage of workers in the area. Although not a requirement of the town, in discussions with the applicant, they have indicated that they will undertake a market feasibility study to make sure that businesses will be viable on the site, so they're not just coming into town on a whim. The Planning Act does not address matters relating to staffing and employee shortages. She also expressed concerns about the proposed business coming into a saturated market and if a contingency plan has been prepared in the event the buildings do not get occupied. Such plans have not been required for other commercial developments in town as far as I know, and the Planning Act does not deal with this particular concern of Ms. Lutz. In summary, the applications have been submitted to amend the local official plan and zoning bylaw to facilitate development of a commercial plaza consisting of 4 buildings. A seasonal outdoor sales area is also proposed and will be associated with a permitted use on the site. The proposed development is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and the proposal meets the intent and spirit of the official plan policy and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. The relief requested for landscaped open space area is a minor deviation from the requirement. The proposal represents efficient use of the lands for commercial development and is good land use planning. With respect to the recommendation, we are recommending that the local official plan application be forwarded to County Council for approval, that the committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z-2021-021 as attached, and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption, and also that adoption of the zoning bylaw amendment application be deferred pending approval of the official plan amendment by county council. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. So you've heard the recommendation there. Barbara's read it, so we'll take questions or comments from members of the committee. Hold on a second so that I can see you all. There we go. Okay, questions or comments from members of the committee? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I understand Councillor Mayette's concern about the preservation of barns. It is a fading thing in our area and all across Ontario. The old style barns are disappearing, and it's a piece of history. But I hope that we're not going to hold up any development on this because of that and the house. I know we've made some contact out there to try and find some people, and hopefully somebody will come and be able to deconstruct it. The timbers itself are worth quite a bit in the reconstruction business. A lot of people are using them and fixing them, and houses go with that. So I hope somebody will come in and take that. But I really hope that we don't delay development of this plan because of the house and the barn.
Okay, thank you. We'll get Councillor Grace and then Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to make a comment that I appreciate that the applicant did reach out to those 2 sources to try to preserve the buildings, and hopefully something positive will come of that. I wanted to just speak about the open space, the open green space, and the change from 20.6% to 28%. I respect town staff's position that this is going to be sufficient. And I noted in the comments in the report that there was a point made about comparison with older developments like Walmart and Canadian Tire, with 15% of the landscaping as the standard then. And that's not a compelling argument to me. We know a lot more now about the importance of maintaining green space and environment. So while I would have ideally liked for 30%, as I said, I respect staff's position on that, and we'll go along with the 28%. I would really urge, and I know town staff will do its best in the site plan control process to make sure that we have a high quality of plantings, which I think Barbara's already referred to some of those, and think about maybe some pollinator friendly plantings. Thank you, Barbara, for the report.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Mayett next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Grace and Vice Deputy Mayor Matheson, or Deputy Mayor Matheson, sorry, for bringing that up around the preservation of the barn. And I'm sure that the developer, with his track record of developments around the province, will not squander the resource of that barn. There are many repurposing places, one just in Southampton, Heritage Wood, that would jump at the chance, I'm sure, of repurposing some of the wood in that barn. Other than that, I think it's as planner Mugabe pointed out, this seems to me as good land use planning, and I will be supporting this application.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, mine was just really a comment. All three have said it, I think, well, and that's, the landscaping is, I'm satisfied. I spoke about the 20%. I wasn't happy with 20% landscaping, and up to 28% now, I think is very fair, very reasonable. I look forward to seeing that plan at site plan control and types of plantings being used. And I just really want to thank the developer too for investing in our community. I think this is going to be a really good development for the, for the north side of Port Algon and in Saugeen Shores here. So I just wanted to commend the developer for bringing those dollars into our community. I think it's going to be a dandy. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, thank you. Further questions or comments from members? I would, I guess, point out I was appreciative of the change on the parking calculation and the removal of the request to exclude the seasonal sales area from the calculation. I think that that's the right thing to do. Now we have a pretty good sense that that there is adequate parking on the site for all of the development and commercial activity that's proposed. So I think that that's very positive. And overall, with this, particularly with the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment and the bringing of more commercial development space or the creation of more commercial space, it's completely in line with what we need to be doing. We have an awful lot of residential zoned property in this municipality, but not enough commercial. That's been established as a clear fact by the county through their some of the work they're doing on their official plan. So this is moving us in the right direction. We need this kind of development to support the community as it grows. So it certainly will have my support. So if there's nothing further, you have heard the recommendation, and so all in favor. Okay, so that moves on to the second item, 6.2.2, L 2021-006 and Z 2021-043, Lamont Employment Lands, Town of Saugeen Shores, and Daniel Kingsbury has the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of committee. So I'm here to present the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment that are proposed for the Lamont Park lands. I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen. Yes, I am. So just bear with me here. Okay, very good. So the intent of this this report is to come back to committee with issues that were raised at the May 25th public meeting and to offer a recommendation on the proposed application. As mentioned, the proposal is to establish a business park on a 14.5 hectare portion of the lands to better position the town with future economic development opportunities resulting from shifting economic trends, including those opportunities associated with the knowledge-based economy. The remaining 35 hectares are to be used for a sports field complex, as well as environmental protection lands, which may include trail uses as well. So just in terms of site context here, the lands have frontage on concession 6. Current uses include agricultural as well as environmental. Surrounding land uses include agricultural and environmental, extractive industrial, and residential. Just to note, the lands were at one point an active aggregate pit. They do have, in terms of servicing, potential for water. And as mentioned, access to concession 6. So MHBC Planning did a preliminary planning report on the lands to determine the viability of the lands for a business park and proposed a concept consisting of 17 lots ranging in size from 1 to 3 acres. The lot sizes are proposed to offer some flexibility for smaller businesses while also allowing consolidation of parcels into larger holdings if needed. Now, this is a conceptual plan. There is no plan of subdivision associated with these lands. Should the lands be developed in the future, if the proposed amendments are approved, they would be subject to either a site plan subdivision and or site plan control and or a plan of subdivision as well. So I'll just again sort of speak to some of the highlights of that MHBC report in identifying some of the constraints on the land. Those yellow buffer areas are buffers around sensitive uses. So those sensitive uses are existing dwellings, and those buffers are 300-meter buffers in line with the provincial D6 standard, which is a compatibility guidelines for industrial uses relative to sensitive uses. So within those 300-meter buffer areas, applicants as proposed would be required to undertake a D6 assessment to determine impacts to surrounding lands. The brown areas here are identified as areas of high archaeological potential. So I believe there are known sites there that require further assessment, and those areas too have been incorporated into the proposed zoning bylaw through a holding provision. So just in terms of the mechanics of this proposal, as I mentioned, the lands are currently designated extractive industrial. So the official plan amendment establishes the principle of use on the lands. So the amendment is proposing to redesignate the lands from the extractive industrial to the employment designation with an exception to that designation. So that's a special provision that permits uses beyond what are already permitted in the employment designation, and those uses are generally aligned with sort of knowledge-based economy type uses, as well as sort of the traditional industrial uses that you'd also see in the employment designation. There's also guidance in the proposed amendment to require high architectural design and landscaping for the lands that are adjacent to concession 6. Now, in terms of the zoning, the purpose of the zoning bylaw is to implement the principle of use established through the official plan, and it deals with specifics related to permitted uses, setbacks, and other technical considerations. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would establish a new business park zone in the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. In that business zone would be further broken down into 4 areas with special provisions relating to those D6 buffers I noted earlier. So those lands within the D6 buffer would require a D6 assessment, and also those lands with the archaeological potential would require an archaeological assessment as well. And again, that requirement for enhanced landscaping along concession 6 is carried through in the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as well. Now, at the last meeting, we went through a number of planning considerations, and I won't get into those in great detail. They're contained in the report. I will provide some comment as they relate to public comments on the next slide, but in general, the planning considerations noted are the town currently has a deficiency of employment lands to meet its future employment needs. That's been established through some of the work that the county's doing through the Plan the Bruce Good Growth exercise, which is the proposed growth management strategy for the county. Compatibility with the surrounding area. Again, there's a consideration of the provincial guideline related to industrial uses relative to sensitive uses. The D6 guideline is implemented through the proposed zoning bylaw. Servicing, the lands are proposed to be partially serviced with water. Traffic, there a number of considerations around traffic were raised at the public meeting, which I'll get into in the next slide. Landscape and buffering, again, as noted, there's enhanced landscaping along concession 6, and the cultural heritage is in reference to the archaeological sites. There's also natural heritage features on the site, and again, I'll get in those get into the details very soon through the SVCA's comments. So we did receive some comments both at the public meeting and subsequently through written correspondence by 2 of the attendees to the public meeting regarding concerns of the location of the businesses and business park in general relative to other areas in town, and some comments offering a different vision for the lands as a mixed use type development. Traffic and safety concerns were safety and access concerns were raised. Construction impacts, negative impacts regarding the permitted uses within the business park, and the destruction of natural heritage features. So I'll just sort of quickly go over some of these, and again, there's a response provided in the reports in more detail. Cognizant of the timing of this presentation, I'll just sort of note that the lands are located in close to the highway. There is currently a deficiency of employment lands within the town, so those are lands that would house the town's future workforce. So this is something the town needs, and this location relative to others is preferable, in large part because it is within the town's existing boundaries. So there's no requirement for a settlement area boundary expansion, which is a timely and costly process under the Planning Act. There are some traffic issues that were raised on concession 6, including the location of entrances and driveways, and speed limits and sight lines. The town has, as the proponent for this amendment, has hired Paradigm Engineering to address many of the concerns through a traffic impact assessment, and those recommendations stemming from the traffic impact assessment will will be and can be implemented through the site plan control process. I believe Amanda is on the line if needed to sort of speak to the specifics of that study as well. Construction impacts to neighbors. I mean, this is always a concern with any new development, and those impacts are mitigated to some extent by existing bylaws outside the Planning Act, as well as impacts from the permitted uses within the business park. In regards to that concern, I will note that again, the province's D6 guideline has been incorporated into the implementing zoning bylaw. So the D6 guideline spells out specific sort of mitigation measures and other requirements to buffer against sensitive uses, as well as that enhanced landscaping and architectural requirement along concession 6. And there is concerns expressed regarding the destruction of natural heritage features and functions. In that regard, the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority has provided comments. They're generally find the application acceptable, provided that mitigation measures are implemented and the environmental protection mapping is refined, which it has been in the draft schedule. So the mitigation measures include sort of standard measures for erosion and sediment control during construction, that to avoid impacts to the fish habitat of Mill Creek. And they also note mitigation measures related to migratory birds and plantings to accommodate the monarch butterflies, which is a species of concern. So both of these details are typically implemented through site plan control. So, and just to conclude here, I'll provide a brief recap. The amendments are to the official plan amendment, as well as the town zoning bylaw to develop a business park. The proposed OPA would redesignate the lands to employment exception. The zoning bylaw amendment would create a new business park zone with special provisions requiring development to be under site plan control, as well as provisions for compatibility, namely the D6 provision that I mentioned, and archaeological assessment requirements as well. So the recommendation is that the official plan amendment be approved and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for consideration of adoption, and to Bruce County, the approval authority, for consideration as well. And that the zoning bylaw amendment likewise be adopted and forwarded to council, but that final decision on the zoning bylaw amendment be deferred by council until the approval of the official plan amendment is in place by county council. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Daniel. So there is a recommendation. I'll read it and then we can have questions or comments. It's recommended that the official plan amendment L2021-0006 be approved and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for consideration of adoption and the county of Bruce for approval. That committee approved zoning bylaw amendment Z 2021-043 is attached, and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption. That final adoption of the associated zoning bylaw amendment Z 2021-043 be deferred pending approval of the official plan amendment by county council. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilor Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So currently that field is in agricultural use, and it has been for about the past 15 years. Prior to that, it was, as was pointed out by the planner, it was a gravel pit. And it was since taken out of service and topsoiled, and it's been in the care of one of the local farmers since. I believe we're renting that piece of land since we took ownership of it to the local farmer. And so we're taking about 40 acres of farmland out of service at a time when I think we should be preserving our food producing lands, but we do need commercial base. We need some employment lands. But if you look at the map, there's about I think it's a 30-meter buffer around the entire perimeter of the proposed zoning change area. And I was wondering what consideration has been given for the use of that land. Is it going to remain in agricultural use, or will it be simply let to overgrow and become natural again, like just let the weeds grow, or will it be landscaped and made into parkland? I know that creek bottom fairly well along the back there. It's a good spot for turkey hunting in the spring, not just by myself, but people use that. And I presume hunting will no longer be allowed there once there's employment lands. But is there any plans for that area, the 30-meter buffer around the entire back end? Obviously, we can't develop it. We can't put buildings on it. It's within the buffer area. But what would be the fate of that land? Are you aware, Daniel?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, I can't advise that the lands you're talking about are zoned or are proposed to be zoned environmental protection, which is a fairly restrictive zone. It does permit some sort of conservation type uses, trails, and so on. I believe it permits existing agricultural uses. So in that regard, I think whether or not the existing agricultural use is probably best answered by the proponent, which is the town. I don't have the details of what the towns. I see Jay has just popped up, so I'll maybe defer to him on that one.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I came on and now I feel like I'm going to be evasive, is that we haven't decided what that purpose is for, but I was going to agree with Dan is that the existing activity is also permitted. So, we can have that discussion, internally and if it's important enough, we can provide a recommendation to council as well about how to maintain and otherwise enhance that space, so it's not just become an overgrown location. Because I agree to the extent that we want to try to optimize the use of those lands, all the lands we own.
Okay. Are there further questions or comments from members of the committee? I don't see any, so you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so that moves us on to the final one, which is 6.2.3 Z 2021-001 for 2536112 Ontario Incorporated, care of Saba, Bruce Road 3, Plan 697, lots 1 to 31. And our planner, Barbara Mugabe, has the report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Chapno. It'll just take a few seconds to load up the presentation. So the statutory public meeting was held on June 21 of this year. Since the public meeting, we have continued to receive comments from members of the public. There has been a lot of interest in the applicant's environmental impact study. Therefore, the staff report before committee is once again presenting the findings and recommendations of the environmental impact study. As committee may recall, Mr. Saba's property is in the settlement area of Southampton and fronts onto Bruce Road 13 at its south end, and there an open road allowance portion to Copway Street to the north. The site is 5.7 acres and is fully forested and features a wetland area. The purpose of the application is to rezone the subject lands from planned development to residential first density special holding R1-90-H and R1-91-H and environmental protection. The special provision is to permit 3 dwelling units on one development area, which is R1-90-H, and 7 dwelling units on the second development area, area R1-91-H, whereas the R1 zone only permits 1 dwelling unit on a lot. The development areas are separated by an environmental feature and a small swath of land owned by the town. The landowner will retain ownership of the units and will lease them. So there's no new lots being created. These two architectural renderings are examples of the type of single detached dwellings that Mr. Saba is considering for the subject lands. The dwelling size will range from 1,600 square feet to 2,000 square feet. The town designates the subject land residential with a significant woodland overlay. The woodlands overlay was created, I understand, some 10 years ago, and this was to assist in the preservation of significant woodlands north of the Saugeen River. Development is not permitted within the woodlands unless it has been demonstrated through an environmental impact study that there will be no negative impacts to the natural feature or their functions as an ecological unit. As the majority of the public comments relate to the woodland, I should emphasize that the applicant has conducted an environmental impact study. The findings and recommendations are described in greater detail in the staff report. I'll just very briefly touch on them here. The environmental impact study required that the applicant's site plan be prepared in conjunction with a tree preservation plan. A tree preservation plan has been prepared for the full property. Further, the site plan was developed in conjunction with the tree preservation plan and based on the findings and recommendations of the environmental impact study, which determined the two developable areas. Development can occur subject to the following mitigation measures being incorporated into the development. No development will occur within the wetland feature. No development will occur within 15 meters to the wetland or the amphibian breeding area. No development will occur within the delineated 15-meter wide retained forest wildlife corridor strip, which is situated along the northern limits of the site. Tree cutting or vegetation removal shall not occur during April 1st to August 31st, and this is in compliance with the Federal Migratory Birds Act for woodland bird nesting and rearing habitat. Mitigation measures are to be implemented through site plan control agreement. I should also note that the Conservation Authority will have an opportunity to review and comment on the site plan agreement. Through implementation of Section 15, which is the mitigation measures, the application will be consistent with the provincial policy statement, the Bruce County official plan, and the Town of Saugeen Shores official plan. After the public meeting, Councillor Grace had asked staff a few questions, and so I'll just walk you through those questions and the response that was provided to Councillor Grace. The first question is, do staff know of other municipalities that have these types of development arrangements, and how has that worked for those municipalities? The response is that multiple dwellings on a single lot is not an uncommon ownership structure. The senior planner advises that the municipality of Kincardine approved a zoning bylaw amendment to permit 29 single detached dwelling units in a single parcel in Tiverton. Earlier today, Councillor Grace had wanted additional information about other municipalities that have allowed this type of developments. And I note that Saugeen Acres Mobile Home Park, which is right here in Port Elgin at 322 Concession 6, I just drove by the other day, and there are some 55 homes on the one lot. The difference with the Saba development is that Mr. Saba is proposing single detached dwellings, whereas the Saugeen Acres is a mobile home park. For certain, there are structural differences compared to detached single dwellings, but functionally, this mobile park is full-time residences. Under the proposed structure, Mr. Saba will retain ownership of both parcels and units on those parcels. There will be purpose-built rental units. Whether the units are freehold, rental, or condo is not relevant. An application should not be refused or approved based on the type of tenure. With respect to apartments, I think the difference is that apartments have shared walls, whereas the proposed units are separate from one another. The second question was, what are the disadvantages of this type of arrangement to the town? We are not clearly sure as to how MPAC will value the property, but it will likely be similar to a parcel with an apartment building on it. Selling the units is only possible if there's a plan of condominium, and that is not part of the proposal. Mr. Saba is not proposing a plan of condominium. A plan of condominium offers the ability to design roads to a lower standard while still maintaining site safety and functionality requirements. The third question she had asked is, what possibilities exist for severing to separate the lots for resale? The response is that there are different types of condominium structures that may be applicable should the landowner decide to offer the units for sale. The senior planner has been processing some applications for condominiums and may be able to speak further to this matter. The objective of a condominium plan would be to formalize the ownership structure of the individual units, as well as their interest and ongoing maintenance in the shared elements, such as the roadway. The landowner would bear responsibility for the shared elements since there is no condominium plan associated with the application. The development is subject to site plan, which provides the town with the ability to formalize the design and functionality of the site through an agreement registered on title. I'll now speak to the comments that we've received from members of the public. The day of the public meeting, committee was circulated a petition that was submitted by Mr. Josh Smith. A day after the public meeting, or days after that, that petition was circulated to staff with additional signatures. The common issues raised pertain to the inadequacy of the environmental impact statement, and that the wetness of the area has not been considered, that there will be loss of wetland and wildlife habitat, that there will be impact on wildlife corridor, and as well drainage issues were raised as of concern. These concerns have also been raised by other residents. We heard at the public meeting from the ecologist that an environmental impact study report is a snapshot in time of flora and fauna observed on noted site visit days. The wetland feature and adjacent upland buffer zone and upland corridors have been identified and protected for wetland ecological functions, which includes habitat for different types of wildlife. This protection encompasses many habitats, even for species not observed during those site visit days. A geotechnical investigation and detailed servicing design has not yet been completed. This is the planning approval stage, so engineering details, including matters pertaining to drainage or stormwater management, will be dealt with at subsequent stages of the development process. And this will be prior to issuance of building permits. No development will be permitted within 15-meter wide retained forest wildlife corridor. The Conservation Authority reviewed the environmental impact study. They are satisfied with the report and the proposed mitigation measures and the conclusions. Will the streets be wide enough to accommodate emergency vehicles? Will there be fire hydrants? When will Walnut Street be constructed? Those were additional questions that have been asked by members of the public. The laneways are wide enough to accommodate ambulances and fire trucks. All proposed dwellings meet the minimum space requirements for fire hydrants. Town staff has confirmed that Walnut Street will not be opened as a public road, but the laneway or driveways for the development will run parallel to Walnut Street and will be constructed when sewer and water infrastructure is put in place. As a summary, this zoning bylaw amendment is requested to rezone the subject lands from planned development to residential first density special holding R1-90-H and R1-91-H, and environmental protection for the natural heritage feature. The amendment will facilitate the construction of 3 single detached dwellings on one development area and 7 single detached dwellings on a second development area. The development areas are separated by an environmental feature. No new lot creation is proposed, as the owner will retain ownership of all 10 dwellings and will list them. Through implementation of Section 15 mitigative measures, the environmental feature will be protected. The application will be consistent with the provincial policy statement, the Bruce County official plan, and the Town of Saugeen Shores official plan. Mitigation measures are to be implemented through site plan control agreement, and the Conservation Authority will have an opportunity to review and comment on the site plan agreement. The application meets most of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. With regards to your recommendation, planning staff is recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment application. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. So you've heard the recommendation from Barbara, and we'll ask if there's questions or comments from members of the committee. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you a couple questions in a statement. Barbara, will there be 2 access points into this development? I saw the one orange line coming up partway through Ottawa, but will Copeway be extended into as an in and out access?
I don't believe so, but if I may defer to Mr. Posner to please respond if he's.
Yeah, certainly there's 2 accesses, one direct from the county road to serve the 3 lots at the south end, and then one from Copway that will lead to an independent access to the 7 units that are on the north end. And that'll just be a function as a driveway for those 7 units.
Okay, so with that driveway going in off of Copway, and I believe the Vice Deputy Mayor asked this last time, there's a access trail that leads across the county road and down to the lake there. That access trail will still be maintained and kept?
Yeah, it's intended so that we haven't worked out the design with the engineer, but the it's worked or it's proposed that it's a sensitive, like a minor construction of a driveway that'll sensitively works its way as the driveway to the south and allows the trail, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. It allows the trail to connect as it currently exists to the county road and to the west.
So then on the first slide, that orange line that attaches to Ottawa, that's the access point for part of it? Slide number 1?
Well, let me get actual slide here. I haven't got it, but maybe I have it here in my.
You go to the presentation, slide 1.
So slide 1. So you're looking at the north end.
I'm looking at the orange line that goes onto Ottawa Street, right at the bend of the J.
Oh, there's a small access where
Okay,
we
that's an
own.
access corridor?
I'm not sure. I should have looked before the meeting. We own that land that separates the north half from the south half.
Okay, so
It's not
that
meant
makes-
for anything. It's meant to be retained as in its natural form.
I was just wondering if that was an access point, but it's an access corridor. So water and or sewer could go through there, or hydro, whatever. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
I would say very unlikely anything in the long term because
Yeah.
it's not to be used for, there's no development potential.
No, okay. And my final point is a statement. We've talked about the need for accessible housing, and these are leased lots. I think this is a great development. I understand and appreciate the concerns of the neighbors about the loss of woodland, but it is Mr. Saba's property. He can develop it as he needs, and we do need rental units like this. So I look forward to the development as it goes on, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from members? Councilor Grace, and I'll get Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Barbara and Daniel for answering my questions in your report, specifically speaking to them. I do have a couple of other questions. Most of them I sent to you earlier. So just to go back to my question about if someone in the future, the owner in the future, or a future owner wanted to change the ownership structure of this development. We've already talked about the possibility of going to a condominium plan, but I don't think I asked you, would it be possible to change it in the future into a plan of subdivision, or is that opportunity gone?
I believe that opportunity has gone through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that opportunity has gone. It has a roadway that would not meet the public road standard. So I don't think that it would qualify for a plan of subdivision.
So the only possible future opportunity for possible individual ownership and sale of these buildings in the future might be a plan of condominium transference to that.
As far as I can see, yes, you're correct.
Okay. So my next question is about the proposed wildlife corridor that is in the plan. And it looks like from the diagram that I saw that it needs to cross the road that leads into the 7 dwelling development parcel along Copway and at the intersection of Ottawa. Is that proposed corridor going to be left in its natural forested state as much as possible? Or maybe, I don't know, adding vegetation to it if it's disturbed at all. And I wondered if signs could be installed on the street to alert drivers to the existence of that corridor.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, again, yes, the corridor will be left in its natural state. If there's any need for replanting, that will be considered through the site plan approval process. And same with signage as well.
Okay, thank you. There was, to me, I found the discussion of Walnut Street. I went back and read it, and I think I understand what it's saying, but it seemed to me in certain parts between the presentation and the report that there was a bit of a discrepancy. I wondered if maybe Jay could speak to definitively, are there plans at this point to develop the Walnut Street road allowance at any point in the future?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. No, there's no definitive plan to construct Walnut Street or Muncie for that matter. When the town staff reviewed the application, we were satisfied that the driveway that they would be built as private drives parallel to Muncie and Walnut, and that was sufficient. And given the extent of the restrictions recommended in the EIS, we didn't think there was any likely future for or a need even for those roads to be built to town standard. And so I don't, as definitive as I ever get, Councillor Grace, I don't think those roads will be opened.
Okay, thank you. One more question, Mr. Mayor, and then I have a statement. So my last question is building on the point that's been made a couple of times about the fact that because this is not a subdivision, a plan of subdivision, that the road won't be built to conventional municipal standards. Part of this area, we've read in the report, is designated as wetland area, although the EIS says it's not a significant wetland, but it does talk about wetland, and there is a plan in the mitigation measures to try to protect some of that. But I know that some of the adjacent property owners have experienced standing water on their property, and sump pumps running all the time. And so I just wondered about if somebody might be able to speak to any mitigation that might be possible in this road to try to mitigate any drainage issues, stormwater management issues.
Yes, I'm not an expert in stormwater management and drainage, so I don't know if Mr. Posner could help.
Yeah, we certainly. I'm happy to offer an answer. Again, it's not trying to be evasive. That's a significant detail that we expect the developer's engineer to resolve. When they submit their site plan, they need to demonstrate that there'll be no off-site impacts from any of the development, and that includes the driveway construction. So I've made a note remind our engineering staff as well as the developer's engineer in particular to ensure that, at least provide a technical comment that that's to be addressed, and we'll report on that when we bring the site plan if this bylaw is passed by council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few comments then.
Sure.
I certainly support creating more housing in our municipality based on, I think, my understanding in the conventional wisdom that a greater supply of housing should eventually help to create more attainable housing for many people. But I do have a number of concerns about this particular application. One of my biggest concerns is the unconventional ownership model. 10 single-family dwellings, rental dwellings on 2 parcels of land. I have researched throughout Ontario to find a similar model of housing, and I couldn't find anything like this proposal. And so I requested to Daniel and Barbara for examples when they told me that the arrangement is not uncommon. So the 2 examples that we've been told about, the one in Tiverton, so those are 14 semi-detached buildings, dwellings, and 1 single dwelling for a total of 29 rental units. Those are not 29 single houses. The other example is the example that Barbara mentioned at the south end of Port Elgin, the mobile home park. I'm not criticizing these models. I'm just saying that neither one of those, in my opinion, provides a workable example of the model proposed here. My major concern with this arrangement is the long-term stability of the arrangement. It's not to question the best intentions of the applicant. I'm sure that Mr. Saba does have the best intentions, but I have concerns about future standards of maintenance and control should Mr. Saba no longer be in control of this development. The size of these homes on 2 large parcels, I think, would be a significant impediment to resale, especially since the conversion to a condominium plan would be complicated and expensive. And we've been told that there's no opportunity to convert this to a conventional plan of subdivision. In their answers to me and in the planning report, staff has responded that these homes could not be sold separately without converting the lands to a plan of condominium or a condominium exemption registered with the county. The latter, which typically applies to register new units on a block within an existing plan of subdivision, and that's not what this is, and we've been told it never can be. I have a concern, as I've mentioned, about how the development of the property will affect drainage onto neighboring properties, which are already experiencing significant drainage issues. And we've been told that the road cannot be constructed or is not required to be constructed to a municipal standard under the agreement. While by my calculations, almost 60% of the site will be retained as an environmentally protected zone, which is good. A map on page 13 of the Environmental Impact Study, Part 2, shows an existing wildlife corridor linked to wildlife corridors in the planned development parcel, which is adjacent to and north and west of the town's unopened road allowance. There are actually several wildlife corridors that are marked on that map. And that seems to be exactly where those 7 dwelling parcel is going to be. So based on that, I cannot see how the standard of having no negative effects on wildlife can be met with this plan. And for these reasons, I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I Councilor Mayette next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I'd like to thank Councilor Grace for her summation and her comments. I understand too that this is a emotional component. There's an emotional component attached to this one. The neighbors, through their collective signatures, have expressed their desire for this not to go ahead, and for what are seemingly valid reasons. But we have been actively encouraging developers to come up with innovative ways of providing alternatives to home ownership, rental properties. And Mr. Sabah has come up with an innovative model. Unconventional, as it was described, is true. Innovative is another. I liken it to one of the many of you may be familiar with the Park Ridge developments. They have hundreds of developments around the country where they retain ownership of the land, and they either lease or sell the buildings to persons senior, I guess 55 and up, live in these developments. My mother lives in one in Wasaga Beach, and I liken it to that. I think he's trying to fill a void that we have identified over and over again. And in as much as I hate to disappoint the neighbors for the reasons they've stated, I think that we don't want to be seen as asking for innovative solutions to our housing crisis and then turning them down. So for that reason, I am going to be supporting this development application.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments from members? I guess I make a couple of comments myself. I think, and I certainly I've read the comments from the members of the public and hear Councillor Grace's comments. I really don't think that this arrangement is all that off the wall. We have several scenarios, even in the town of Saugeen Shores, where there are several single family type buildings on one lot owned by one person. The tourist cottage parks come to mind. There's one right on the Miramichi Bay Road, not far from, well, just sort of out in the middle, not far from Carter Drive down there and Pegasus Trails, where there's a large park, several single homes there, all on one piece of property, and seems to function very well. I never hear any complaints about it. You think about another example in the town of Port Elgin, next to McDonald's, there's a condo there. It's a condominium corporation, separately owned buildings, but it's on a private road. Really, all we're talking about here is gradations in ownership. Is it owned by a condominium? Is it owned by an individual? But we have several situations like that where private developments exist on private roads, and they function privately and separate. And the municipality doesn't plow the streets and doesn't do any of those things, and it works, I think, rather well. And it fills a gap in the housing market for people who need access to that kind of housing, who need rental, are looking and need a home, and perhaps the apartments that we have available in town don't meet their needs because their family's too large or whatever it is. So I don't think it doesn't strike me as something that's totally brand new. Is it exactly the same as anything else we have? No, but it's also not remarkably different from several examples across the municipality. And as Councillor Myatt rightly points out, we're asking for folks to develop things like that. And this location is a good location for it. This piece of property in question has been zoned for residential development for 60 years. I had staff go back and have a look. It's been the intention clearly for several decades has been for this piece of property to develop in the same way as the rest of the neighborhood around it has developed. I expect in the 1960s, the expectation was that the lot fabric there would end up looking like the lot fabric right next to it, where there would be 20 or 30 single family homes developed in that area. That never occurred. And so now we're looking at something that's actually a lot less than what likely would have been built there had it gone ahead at that time. But the community expectation through several zoning bylaw updates, official plan updates, has been that this would be a residentially developed area. And any member of the community could have seen that in public documents dating back, as I say, through to the 1960s. So it should come as no surprise that we're looking at residential development in this area. And in fact, based on the fact that this council and previous councils have designated as planned development for several decades, I think we have an obligation to allow a property owner who buys the land for that purpose to proceed with residential development. We have made that promise and should stand by it. The question is, what kind of residential development. And I think that this is well different from what's around it, not unique to our community. And I think it will, I honestly think it'll work rather well. I think it will turn out well, and that it'll be once constructed, it'll work with the neighborhood and turn out to be a positive development, not only for the whole community in terms of filling our housing need, but also for the neighborhood. So I think it's a good development. Now I'll be supporting it. Are there further questions or comments from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting this recommendation. I think this is good use of good planning in that area. You talk about the 60-year, going back from former Southampton days, intended use for that property. I like the fact that 60% is being protected for environmental protection. I think that's solid, and it brings another 11 units into the rental market. Something that's important to this community. I did a little research on our vacancy rates in Saugeen Shores right now are 0.4%, less than 1%, less than 0.5% vacancy rate for rental units in our community. We've got a problem. We've got a problem here in our community with rental units, and this provides 11 additional. And I appreciate the concerns of the residents in the area, but I like the 60% protected, and I think it's good planning, and so I'll be supporting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments before I call the question? I don't see any. So you've heard the recommendation. I'll ask all in favor. Opposed? That's carried. All right, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of the reports, and we have nothing else on the agenda save for adjournment. And I have a resolution that this planning committee meeting of August 16, 2021 hereby adjourns at 7:42 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Grace.
Mr. Mayor, before you take the vote, our next meeting is scheduled for the 20th of September. We might want to reconsider, as that is election night.
What you have? What are you going to be doing on election night?
Watching.
Okay. Well, we can. Why don't we?
It's just, maybe we have an informal, have staff send us a message out and see what everybody's doing, but it's important to make sure everybody has the opportunity to get out and be able to vote in the federal election. And whether you're home from work at what time it is, I'm not sure, but we might want to just take that into consideration.
Yeah, we can always adjust the meeting schedule, and so we can talk to council about that in the coming days. Thanks for that. If there's nothing further, then we have the motion. It's moved and seconded. Donnie just moved it to 7:43, so I'm just going to change it to 7:43. And all in favor?